I remember the exact moment my world shifted. I had just finished tidying the living room, the late morning sun spilling across the hardwood floor, when my phone buzzed with a voice memo notification. I didn't expect anything unusual, just a message from my daughter Megan. But as soon as I pressed play, the ordinary afternoon shattered. Her voice, not meant for me, carried a cold, calculating tone that I had never heard. They were talking about me, about my life, about taking my home and sending me away as if I were an object to be discarded. I froze, heart hammering as the words sank in. Megan and her husband Ryan were discussing a low-cost nursing facility, planning the logistics, even referring to my life insurance as if my death could benefit them. The sheer cruelty of it struck me like a punch to the chest. My own daughter, the girl I had held in my arms every night, the one I had sacrificed decades for, had plotted against me in whispers and recorded plans. I replayed the memo again and again, each repetition deepening the ache in my chest, each detail making disbelief turn to grief. The normalcy of my home, the familiar clink of the teacups, the faint smell of vanilla from the candle on the counter, it all felt like a mask for the betrayal I had just uncovered. How could the people I loved most plan such a thing behind my back? I thought about the years I had spent raising Megan, the nights I had worked cleaning offices and laundromats until my hands were raw, the early mornings patching her coat by candlelight so she could go to school warm and dry. The sacrifices I made thinking that love and devotion would come back to me in gratitude and respect. Sitting on the edge of the couch, I let myself breathe. Each inhalation a struggle against the swirl of shock, sadness, and rising anger. The realization settled heavy on my chest. My life, my home, my dignity, they had been taken for granted. And now I was faced with the reality that I needed to act. But before I could even begin to think about my next steps, I knew I had to remember why I had fought so hard for Megan in the first place. The history of all the love and sacrifice that had built the bond we once shared. As I set the phone down, hands still trembling, I felt a flicker of resolve. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a reckoning. And to understand how far I had come, I needed to look back to the years of devotion, struggle, and unwavering love that had defined my life as a mother. The story of those sacrifices would guide the choices I was about to make. I was only 19 when I became a mother. Megan's father had disappeared before she even opened her eyes, leaving me with nothing but a crib I could barely afford and a promise I made to myself that my child would never feel unwanted. Those early years were relentless. I worked cleaning jobs from dawn until dusk, offices, houses, sometimes laundromats, my hands raw and aching. Yet every dollar I earned went into Megan's future. Every sacrifice a brick in the life I hoped she would have. I remember one particularly cold morning when the rain soaked her thin coat. I sat by candlelight, carefully stitching the seams until they could withstand another day. Megan's small voice whispered thanks. Her cheeks pressed to mine, and in that fleeting moment, the ache in my back seemed lighter, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. I told myself that these moments of hardship were not just endured, but were love made tangible, hope woven into every stitch. When she started school, the contrast with other children was striking. They arrived in shiny cars, wearing crisp new uniforms, while Megan walked beside me, her shoes polished until they gleamed from my careful hands. Each day, I reminded myself that love could cover gaps that money could not, that devotion could transform sacrifice into security. College came with a price I could scarcely imagine: $15,000 a year. I borrowed against my home, sold my only ring, even pawned my mother's sewing machine. I refused to let financial barriers keep Megan from the opportunities I had never known. Every form I signed, every loan I took, was a declaration that I would bend every rule of possibility to lift her higher, to create a future she deserved. I believed that love given so freely, so unconditionally, would return in gratitude, in shared laughter, in a bond unbroken by time or circumstance. Even as I watched her grow, meet new friends, and eventually find love in Ryan, I trusted that our connection, forged in years of struggle and devotion, would remain unshakable. My hope was a quiet flame that lit every dark hour of exhaustion, every pang of doubt, every lonely night spent wondering if I was doing enough. Looking back, those years were a testament to endurance and devotion. Each act of sacrifice, each stitch patched by candlelight, each dollar stretched beyond its limit, was an investment in our bond, a promise that I believed would never be broken. And yet, as I was about to discover, even the deepest love can be tested in ways we never expect, as the cracks in our seemingly unbreakable bond would soon begin to show. At first, life after Megan married Ryan felt like a continuation of the warmth we had always shared. Sundays were our sanctuary, laughter echoing through the kitchen as we cooked together, Megan recounting little victories at work, Ryan sharing a quiet joke that made us all smile. For a while, I allowed myself to believe that the bond I had built over decades of sacrifice remained unbroken, that love and gratitude would always bridge the gap between generations. But the subtle changes began creeping in, almost imperceptibly. Requests that once seemed occasional began to pile up. They needed help covering the mortgage one month, the car payments the next. Sometimes small things I could manage, other times amounts that pricked at the edges of my carefully budgeted savings. I told myself it was temporary, that it was part of supporting a young couple trying to establish themselves. But a gnawing unease began to settle in my chest. Then came the emotional distance. Phone calls grew shorter. Messages went unanswered for days. I found myself waiting by the line, hope tapering off into disappointment as I realized that later never came. There were moments when they invited me out, and yet I would walk into a diner to find them absorbed in each other, barely noticing I was there. I stirred my coffee, silently measuring the space between us, a space that seemed to widen with every interaction. Little things started to stand out: the subtle rearrangements of my kitchen cabinets, the casual comments about my belongings being outdated, the insistence on handling my bills. At first, I brushed them off as helpfulness, but deep down, a spark of caution ignited. Every overlooked invitation, every whispered comment I caught when entering a room, became a note in the quiet symphony of control they were beginning to exert over my life. I replayed our early Sundays in my mind, comparing them with the current strain, and the contrast cut sharply. The closeness I had once cherished now felt fragile, as if every gesture of care from me was met with silent calculation. Every laugh from the past replaced by polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I began to observe more keenly, noting patterns that had previously escaped my attention: the timing of calls, the sudden shifts in conversation, the way Ryan's presence subtly altered Megan's tone. Each day, the tension grew, a quiet, persistent hum of anxiety beneath the surface of our interactions. And as I sensed the distance stretching further, I realized that the bond I had relied on might be fraying in ways I hadn't anticipated. There was a looming uncertainty, a quiet storm gathering in the background of our daily routines. I didn't yet know how far it would reach, only that something was amiss, and that the next revelation might change everything. Little did I know, the moment of betrayal was closer than I imagined, waiting to arrive in a single, cold recording that would shatter the fragile sense of security I still clung to. The phone buzzed, and I saw the message from Megan, a voice memo meant for Ryan. I shouldn't have opened it. I told myself that, over and over. But curiosity, or maybe instinct, pulled me in. The first words hit me like ice water. They were talking about me. About sending me to a low-cost nursing facility. About taking over my house. Even mentioning my life insurance, as if my death was just another transaction to them. I sat frozen, my hands clutching the phone, every beat of my heart pounding in my ears. My stomach turned. Shock, disbelief, the kind of betrayal that makes the world feel hollow. I replayed it, hoping somehow I had misheard. But the cold precision of their voices was unmistakable. Megan and Ryan were planning my life as if I didn't exist, as if the years of love, sacrifice, and care I had poured into Megan were meaningless. The room felt suddenly smaller. Every object, every familiar corner of my home, seemed like evidence of the life they wanted to seize. My throat tightened. A wave of heartbreak washed over me. I thought of the sacrifices, the jobs I'd taken cleaning offices and laundromats, the nights I patched her coats by candlelight, the money I had borrowed, and the ring I had sold to make sure she could have an education. And now, in one cruel voice memo, all that devotion was dismissed as an obstacle to their plans. Anger began to rise, intertwined with the grief. How could the daughter I loved so fiercely conspire against me? How could Ryan, who I had welcomed into my home, think so coldly of me? My mind raced. This wasn't just hurt. This was a call to action. I couldn't let them dictate the ending of my story. My home, my life, my independence, they were mine, and I would protect them. I put the phone down briefly, letting the silence wrap around me, trying to steady my thoughts. Each breath was deliberate, each heartbeat a reminder that I still had control. I thought through every document, every account, every corner of my house. What could they touch? What could they manipulate? How could I regain security before they acted on their plan? I felt a spark of resolve ignite, steady and sharp. The shock and heartbreak had transformed into clarity. I would investigate. I would document. I would act strategically. This betrayal was cruel, but it had revealed exactly what I needed to do. I would not be powerless. And so, with the memo still glowing on the phone, I began to plan. The first steps were clear in my mind: gather evidence, secure my accounts, understand the scope of their deception. My pulse quickened, a mixture of fear and determination propelling me forward. The game had changed, and I knew that from this moment, I would no longer be a bystander in my own life. The next moves would be critical, and I was ready to take them. I knew I couldn't let fear dictate the next steps. The voice memo had shown me the depth of their plan, and now it was time to act deliberately. My first thought was the bank. If they had forged authorizations, I needed to uncover them and take control of my finances before any more damage could be done. I arrived early, the morning light spilling across the lobby, and met with the branch manager I had known for years. Her familiarity was comforting, but I didn't allow myself to relax. I explained that I needed to review every transaction and authorization from the past 6 months, to cancel any external access immediately. As we went through the files together, my heart sank at first, then steadied when we compared signatures. There they were, authorizations that looked like mine, but were clearly forged. I asked to see the originals, and the difference was unmistakable. My relief at confirming the forgery was tempered by the realization that someone so close had betrayed me. Someone I had trusted. I instructed the bank to freeze all transfers, change accounts, and set strict permissions, no changes without my verified consent. And for the first time, I redirected my life insurance to a charity I had long admired, ensuring that if they thought they could benefit from me, they would find the funds going elsewhere. But the investigation didn't stop there. My niece Rebecca had been helping them, whether out of loyalty or fear. I wasn't yet sure. I needed her cooperation, and the voice memo became my leverage. When I visited her office unexpectedly, I observed the nervous way she handled paperwork, the small tremor in her hands. I calmly let her know that I understood what had been done, that I had proof, and that she had the choice to help me reverse it or face exposure. Her hesitation was palpable, her guilt unmistakable. Slowly, she began to provide information, documents, and confessions that painted the full picture of the conspiracy against me. Each revelation, each recovered document, strengthened my resolve. I moved systematically, cross-referencing accounts, confirming transactions, and cataloging every forged letter and false medical note. The rhythm of my actions was deliberate, almost soothing a way to counter the chaos of betrayal with methodical control. I felt the tension lift slightly with each step, replaced by a quiet, firm confidence. By the end of the day, I had a comprehensive understanding of what had been done and a clear path forward. Evidence in hand, accounts secured, and allies in place. I knew I was ready to confront them. The balance of power had shifted. Where once I had been vulnerable, I now had clarity, control, and the strategic upper hand. As I left my niece's office, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. The confrontation was coming, and I knew I had to approach it with calm authority and precision. Every decision, every step, had been calculated to protect myself and reclaim what was mine. The next stage would demand courage, but for the first time since discovering the memo, I felt ready to meet it head-on. The morning arrived, bright and ordinary, but I felt the weight of a storm about to break. I had left only a brief note on the table, running errands, while inside. Megan and Ryan sat in my living room, oblivious to what was coming. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I rose, steady despite the tremor of anticipation in my chest. Standing on the porch were my attorney, Daniel Whitman, 2 uniformed officers, and a notary with a leather case. The air shifted immediately. Megan's smile faltered the moment she saw them enter, her composure cracking like thin ice. Ryan's hands fidgeted, betraying the calm he had tried to project. I gestured for everyone to sit, my voice even controlled, yet carrying the weight of years of betrayal and sacrifice. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of papers and the hum of tension. Daniel began methodically, laying out the forged bank authorizations side by side with my original signatures. The difference was undeniable, each document a testament to the deception I had uncovered. I watched Megan's color drain as realization hit her. I felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the knowledge of the heartbreak their actions had caused. Next came the voice memo. I played it slowly, allowing each cold, calculated word to echo in the room. I could see the flicker of guilt and panic in Megan's eyes as she grasped that her plotting was now undeniable. Ryan's usual confidence dissolved into tight-lipped tension. My chest swelled with a mixture of vindication and sorrow. Vindication for exposing the truth. Sorrow for the betrayal of a child I had loved so fiercely. Finally, the niece's confession completed the picture. Rebecca had worked under pressure, and now her voice, shaky but honest, revealed the extent of their scheme. Piece by piece, the evidence formed a clear, unassailable narrative of deceit and attempted theft. I felt the surge of authority that comes from taking control of one's own life and defending it with courage and precision. I reflected on the years of sacrifice, the long nights, and the moments I had wondered if it would all be enough. Here, in this quiet confrontation, all that devotion had a voice. I realized that asserting my independence and dignity was not merely about possessions, it was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life. I was no longer the vulnerable mother. I was a woman armed with truth and determination. As the officers prepared to act, escorting Megan and Ryan, I remained seated, absorbing the finality of the moment. The house, once a place of subtle manipulation and whispered control, felt reclaimed. Yet, even in this triumph, I knew the aftermath would have its own battles, the whispers of gossip, the online posts, the questions from neighbors. My victory was clear, but the work of protecting my reputation and peace of mind had only begun. And so, with the confrontation concluded and the first waves of justice set in motion, I allowed myself a slow, deliberate breath. The path ahead required vigilance, patience, and careful stewardship of the life I had fought so hard to preserve. The days after the confrontation were quieter, yet the echoes of betrayal lingered. Megan and Ryan had not surrendered silently. Instead, they turned to the public, posting online claims that I was confused, incapable, and unsafe alone. Each notification made my chest tighten, every comment a small stab at the dignity I had fought to preserve. Strangers questioned my competence, neighbors whispered, and even well-meaning acquaintances offered unsolicited concern. The social scrutiny was relentless, a modern shadow that followed me through my own home. I realized immediately that I couldn't respond in anger or panic. I had to be methodical, deliberate. I began documenting every incident, the messages, the calls, the false reports, and compiled them carefully with the evidence I had already secured. Working closely with my attorney, we ensured that every accusation was countered with verifiable proof of my competency. The signed confessions, paired with the official evaluations, became shields that restored not just legal protection, but the narrative of my life. Slowly, the weight of public doubt began to lift. With the legal safeguards in place, I made the decision to sell my old house, the place steeped in both memories and betrayal. The sale was more than a financial transaction. It was symbolic, a deliberate step toward reclaiming peace and autonomy. I moved into Maplewood Gardens, a supportive senior community where laughter, light, and genuine companionship replaced suspicion and manipulation. There, I found purpose again, volunteering at the Silver Harbor Foundation. I connected with other seniors who had faced abandonment or deception. Sharing my story became a way to guide and empower others, reinforcing the lessons I had learned about boundaries, respect, and self-protection. Each act of service, each conversation, became a quiet affirmation that resilience and dignity could be rebuilt, even after betrayal. In these moments, I reflected on the journey, the sacrifices, the heartbreak, the strategic decisions, and the courage it took to stand firm. I realized that love, while important, must be coupled with respect and acknowledgement of personal boundaries. Protecting oneself is not cruelty. It is survival. It is self-respect. And it is a form of love that ensures one can continue to give without being consumed. As I look back now, I feel a profound sense of peace. My life is no longer defined by those who sought to take from me, but by the choices I made to reclaim it. And if my story reaches anyone listening, know this: your voice matters. Your boundaries are valid, and it is never too late to defend your dignity. Share this story, reflect on it, and remember that true love uplifts rather than diminishes. Your courage, like mine, can light the way for others. Moving into Maplewood Gardens felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life, one I had claimed for myself. The echoes of my old home, filled with memories both tender and painful, faded behind me as I embraced the sunlight and laughter of this supportive community. Each morning, I walk through the courtyard, greeting neighbors who value connection and respect. And each afternoon, I immerse myself in volunteer work, sharing time and stories with seniors who have faced challenges similar to my own. The act of giving, now untainted by fear or manipulation, feels restorative. I see the importance of boundaries and self-respect in a way I hadn't fully understood before. My independence is no longer fragile. It is safeguarded by lessons learned and decisions firmly taken. I reflect often on the journey, the heartbreak, the betrayals, the calculated steps I had to take to protect myself, and I realize that standing up for oneself is not cruelty. It is survival, dignity, and an affirmation of the life I still wish to build. I have cultivated relationships grounded in mutual respect, laughter, and genuine care. The days are filled with purpose, and my nights carry a quiet satisfaction, knowing that my life is once again mine to shape. I carry the past not as a burden, but as a reminder of my resilience and the strength it takes to protect one's self-worth. If my story reaches you today, I hope it inspires reflection on your own boundaries and self-respect. Remember, defending your dignity is an act of courage and love for yourself. Take it as a gentle reminder that it is never too late to reclaim your life, to prioritize your peace, and to nurture relationships that honor both love and respect. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and comment. I would love to hear how you honor your own boundaries and the lessons you've learned about protecting your life and your heart.